Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the 423rd meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. This is a weekly meeting series where people can discuss comics they've made, discuss comics that they write about, thoughts they have on the comics medium, or just people who work with comics in some way that want to talk about art or an issue that they're interested in. It's completely free form, and it was founded a decade ago by the cartoonist and educator Ben Catcher. My name's Austin English. I'm co-curating this calendar of the symposium with Ben, Lily Correa, and Bill Cardelopoulos, as well as Danny Fingeroth. And the symposium is funded with a grant from the Will and Ann Eisner Foundation, which allows the speakers to the symposium to receive a fee to speak to us, some compensation for what they're bringing to the symposium, and allows it to be free for people to access the symposium. Um, I'm very, very excited for our guests tonight, Sam Seigel and Sarah Kirby. I can say that for myself in the last 5 years, there have been many, many cartoonists emerging, not just in New York, but throughout the United States. But for me, the cartoonists that I see the most are the ones in New York City. And I would say that a common trait that a lot of these artists that are emerging share that I see is a lack of allegiance to the overburdening of comics tradition. Not that a lot of these emerging cartoonists don't take things from the past of cartooning or learn things from the past of cartooning, but an allegiance to it and a desire to completely replicate it seems to be left behind, or at least less of a burden than maybe for generations of cartoonists in the past. And this is a very refreshing thing to me. It's something that I really am invigorated by. And I thought it was very important to bring Sam and Sarah in to the symposium schedule because of many of the cartoonists that have been emerging in the last 5 years that I've been very excited about. I think Sam and Sarah make some of the most beautiful work being made today. And the term inspiring work is something I don't like to use that much, but I do find their work very inspiring and very exciting. For my investment in this medium, and wanting it to evolve in interesting ways that surprise me, their work really, really does that. So I'm very, very excited to hear from them today. A word about participation with the symposium. Part of the idea of the New York Comic Symposium is a unity between speaker and audience. So if you have any questions, if any thought, random or otherwise, enters your mind, the worst thing to do would be to hold on to that thought and not share it. With our speakers and ask them if anything comes up. Try to write a question in the chat as they're speaking, and I'll call on you after they're done. Or you can indicate that you want me to call on you, and you can read the question yourself. So I'm going to read a very quick biography of our two presenters, and then I will kick things over to them. Sarah Kirby is a multimedia artist born in beautiful San Francisco in the hospital in the year 2000. Sam Seigel is a widely loved and worldly hailed cartoonist, painter, and writer born at a similar hospital in the year 2000. Together, they make an unstoppable force. Hear what these two have to say in this legendary conversation, which, God willing, will blast waves across the eastern seaboard. Okay, Sarah and Sam, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Austin, and thank you to everyone for having us on. I think we're going to do a format today where we're going to both introduce ourselves and then we'll get into our legendary conversation after. And I was going to ask Sarah if she wanted to introduce herself and her work first.
Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. Um, Hi, I'm Sarah Kirby. Um, I identify as a multimedia artist. Currently I'm in New York City. I've been here for a while. I grew up in San Francisco and I've been doing comics for about 5 years. I uh I really enjoy exploring a lot of different mediums of art. and one of the newest ones is comics. And before and still during um, me making comics, I make stories with single images like paintings. Um, and I wanted to talk about I guess kind of uh show my art in uh relation to my comics. I was making this one with acrylic and paper mache, and I think my paintings relate a lot to my comics in their imagery. I I started making my comics really looking at my paintings as uh the first way I knew how to make art was really with paintings. And so when I started making comics, I was looking at that to be able to get more comfortable with making comics. I I explored a lot of mediums. Like this one was felt, and this one was colored pencil. Um, and my first comic was in 2020 with uh in Cowlick because Floyd Tangerman asked me to be in an anthology, and I was very excited because I never really made comics before, and I was flattered that, you know, even though he never saw me make a comic, he was still wanted to see my art in a comic form. And when I was making this comic, I was thinking about my process of how I make paintings, and I how I make paintings is really, I think of an image and an emotion that I want to show. And so for this, I thought of a certain image, and I wanted to expand the world that figure or image would be in. So this comic kind of made me think of more of a panoramic world view of the character that I would put in my painting. Um, I um made this yeah during the pandemic, and was excited to explore multiple angles of something that I would have just shown as a single image. Um, and so when I started making paintings, it was more of a word wordless imagery. And I think that's mainly because of my paintings, didn't have any words, and that was how I was starting to get more comfortable with it. And I wanted to keep progressing my comic skill, I guess, and I wanted to make a comic with words, but it felt very daunting because I am not much of a writer and was nervous for people reading my writings. And so I thought a good way around that would be to make an autobiographical comic, because I didn't necessarily have to write a story for that because I lived the story. And so one of the first ones that helped me a lot, I made maybe 2 years ago or 1 year ago, and I it's about my dad and his mattress shop, which I'm gonna read in a minute. And I found his Yelp reviews, and it was very interesting to me to see the Yelp reviews, the customers' reality of the store versus my reality of the store when I was a child. And uh, it's, very different. And This one was recently printed by my friend Mikael, who screen printed it maybe about a month ago. Um, comic from it. Um, A Happy Planet. 4 stars. Definitely a quintessential San Francisco place, meaning they may or may not answer the phone, and they have long ramblings, conversations about everything under the sun, when what you want to do is talk about the mattress. And here is one of our top-selling mattresses, Sleeping Child not included. These are the beds your grandma would have bought. What the fuck? 2 p.m. on a Sunday. They said they would be open. I've been waiting here for 3 hours. This is the best mattresses on the market. There is no, oops, sorry. Did I mess that one up? Okay, there is no sales pressure for purchasing mattresses at other stores in the city, and I've always felt badgered and taken advantage of, but not at A Happy Planet. The sales guy seemed like he was just hanging out and willing to talk about anything under the sun. Um, that so writing autobiographical comics started, making me more comfortable in um writing and progressing my um comic journey. And I reading lots of comics, I still wanted to write more um I wanted to storyboard more comics. And so I was thinking about how I can jump from the next to the next step, from autobiographical comics. And there's so many different ways to make a comic and different ways you can tell a story. And um, that's what I love about art, is experimenting with art. And like with this comic that I'm gonna read about 2 pages of is like a poetry comic that I wrote this poetry, and I wanted to kind of change the meaning of the sentence when it's put next to an image. Um, so uh, that was kind of a nice way for me to write. And then I wanted to keep learning how to make a whole storyboard, like a beginning, middle, and end kind of story. And I wanted to I wanted to develop more of the kind of skills like figuring out the narration and the tonal, the lighting, the mood lighting, and different perspectives. There's just a lot, there's so much to explore with comics because of how multifaceted it is. And that's what really excited me because of my background in enjoying exploring so many different kinds of art. Um, so I'm gonna read this comic, and then I'm gonna read 2 pages of this comic, and then I'm gonna read the entirety of a comic that was in the same book that Mikael printed after this. Speeding past the blurs of color. The blur hasn't been consumed, but will safely be returned. You will be all right anyhow, as long as you remember to only breathe out and never breathe in. Ants crowd below the sidewalk, tripping over the pulse of the twisting roots. Blinded by the clouds crackling. And now I'm gonna read uh, the Long Island gas cloud. Everything used to smell like grass. The ear-numbing clouds sprinted through the crack in the kitchen window, collapsing into our eardrums. The toaster was toasting. The TV was still infomercialing. If you can eat it, you can ball it. Call now. But for some reason, the stove wasn't gusting. I focused my vision on the stringing wallpaper fastening itself to the warped floorboards. Then all at once, I was nose to nose with the wilted wood. A few inches away, you were eye to eye with it too. I thought about the stitches in your sweater, the curls in your hair that were melting into the wood grain. Silence made us indistinguishable. All we have in common is being in love with each other. We were so busy being flat that we failed to notice the rotten egg scent trailing into our atmosphere. Everyone tried to warn us not to move to Long Island, but we didn't think the virtuous national grid would let anything happen to us. Long Island has been known to go a little overboard in praise for the gas. After a while, our knees went stiff and thought it's time to give them a call. Um, so that's the end of that comic, and you know, uh, I'm gonna continue experimenting with comics, and I want to continue exploring multiple ways in making comics. I am excited to just discover what I enjoy most. Like what if I like doing comics with no words or autobiographical or ones where I write an entire storyboard. I just I'm excited to experiment with it. And now I will pass the torch to Samantha for her side.
Thank you, Sarah, for the torch. And thank you for your talk. I can't wait to ask the many questions I have of you in one moment after I explain who I am and what I do with my time. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, let's see. So, Jesus, having a hard time doing this. Okay, so I put this as the first image in my slideshow because it is one of the most recent comics I'd done. And also I thought it was kind of a good overarching encompassing vision of a idea of the comedy that I feel my work has in all of its pieces. So I'm going to read it. I should say before I read it, this is going to be the back cover of an anthology that comes out on Sunday called Pothole. But I will read it. This is how it goes. It said, I had a wonderful dream, one where the bad was good, so the madness made sense and all was happy. And then someone's clapping their hands. Someone's getting a gun held to their face and they say, oh, yes. And another person says, thank God. And someone says, I'm so grateful my home burned down. And someone's smiling and they're crying and they say, it's all too beautiful. And someone has their hands reaching out for a bomb and they say, just one. And then after waking up from the dream, I say, I got to wake up in pure bliss. And I say that this is kind of a good overarching idea of what I do because I do a lot of work with comedy. using the comedy to show sort of like a pain or sadness and then subverting that. I feel like a lot of the time I think that I first got this sick idea of calling this a joke when I heard my first joke, and that is the first joke that many Americans hear as their first joke, which is someone will come up to you and they say, "Why'd the chicken cross the road?" And then, you think about it for a long time and you say, "To get to the other side." And then, you both laugh and then you walk away in different directions. And I thought when we were walking away in different directions, both laughing, that that was because we were talking about the fact that the chicken is committing suicide and the other side that he's getting to is heaven, and it's kind of falling flat on it being a joke because it's a joke that he's committing suicide. It's a joke that that's the time that he decided it was too much for him, and then he just does it. I think I over focused on what that was as a kid, and I think that I thought that that was the baseline that we were all functioning on, and so then my humor came from there. I've learned recently that that is not, Sarah told me recently that that's not why she thought the chicken crossed the road, and that's how this all started. Sort of my world unraveling from there. And then I'm going to go to my next slide. From there, I am going to do the only background information of like a je ne sais pas influence, I would say, that I had. And that is that growing up, my dad was he's a Jewish man that was born in the late 30s, so an unfortunate time for him to be this Jewish man. And so he spends his life kind of doing all the classic white male things he could do in the 60s. And that, of course, eventually leads him, like the Beatles, to become, think that he's part of this Hare Krishna movement. He thinks that, and then he leaves that, and then he goes into a neo-Hindu group, and then he leaves that, and he goes into a neo-Hindu group. It eventually leads him to a guru named Satya Sai Baba, who is a modern day reincarnation of a god. And before him, there is Shirdi K Sai Baba. There's been many Sai Babas the whole time that any of us have been alive. So I tell you this because my dad wanted me to take on this religion more than anything he wanted in my life. And he thought that a good way to get me to believe in the religion early on was to give me comics that the church would produce. And this is a comic, this is a pages from a comic I got early on when I was a kid. And it's about Vishnu and he's talking to his court and he's being very merciful. But the issue is when you give a kid a comic, of people that are supposed to be gods, the kid is not going to believe that the person is God. I'm reading it, I put it down and I go and I read Daredevil and I put that down and I go back and I read another one. But the point is, at the end of the day, I am drawing in a sketchbook to my dad, drawing for Father's Day that's just Daredevil and Vishnu fighting crimes together. So he didn't get a successful vision of what he wanted in terms of religion, but he did get one hell of a comic fan. So in ways it worked out, maybe not the way he wanted, but we are where we are now. So from there, I'm gonna cut out any early, too early on in comics. This one's pretty old. Why am I showing it? I wanted to show it because I had already been doing comics for a while at this point. And I show this one because I was getting, before this comment, I felt like I was getting too caught up in the linear shape of a page. When you make a comic, you want to do boxes, you want to do squares, you want to get the story across, right? And when I had done this comic, which was for a different anthology, many years ago at this point, I wanted to focus on like kind of having an overarching theme that felt natural of the form. It felt like I was forgetting the medium for its value and I was only just doing it to fill a story. So I wanted to change that. And so I tried to spice it up by trying to interweave a bigger story through the pages. Um, I was interested in that idea because a friend of mine had shown me a comic he had done where it was 10 panels by 10 panels, all without words. And he told me that I could read it in any way. And I was like, what do you mean you can read it in any way? And then I looked at it, you could read it as a full circle, as a spiral, you could read it diagonally, and no matter what, you came to the same story of a man who gets trapped over and over again through these different addictions and then is said to rebirth. And it was terrifying to me that he had made such a thing that powerful in one page, and I wanted to softly kind of try to get myself to kind of embrace that idea more towards comic making and not just do it just for filling the stories. So yeah, that's kind of why I had this piece in there. I had this one in here not because this is the final form of a comic. This is not the final form of this comic. I want that to be very clear, okay, everyone? This is a scan of a print of a scan of a print of a scan of a print. And when I say that, I mean that I put this in to show you that I have a sick idea in my head where I can only create an image if I take many things and I glue them all together, press that down, scan it, print that out, draw on that, scan it, and print that out. And I wanted to show that you can kind of see in this image here if you look that that is happening so many times here. And this exists as one image, but that is not an image that is real in real life. But this is not at all the last iteration of this comic. I just thought that this was a good showing of that kind of weird process that I have. Unfortunately, I didn't have any physically here. Um, I should say this now too while I'm here. It'll be a good point for that. I am a painter as well, and I do a lot of writing. I didn't put any paintings in my slide. I'm sorry. I don't know why I didn't do that, but I do have one painting behind me or two. This one is just a painting of a man who's winning a lottery ticket and he's getting hit by a car right as he's winning it. And there's this other painting I'm staring behind me, but yeah, I guess that's all you're gonna get for that. So after I went overly complex, I think at some point I went overly neutral to try to then like instead of doing these complications just to have them, I kind of wanted to see what am I trying to get at? What feeling could I get out with showing as little as possible? And then it got too little. I got too minimalistic and it was another issue as a whole. And then this is me trying to deal with that. Another thing I should say is that I was trying to work with a lot of silhouettes at this time. I was looking at this comic, you know, if anyone knows a comic called Vietnam, it's an anti-draft comic that was made to try to, you know, get people more interested in what they were doing, why are we in this war, trying to get more people engaged. And the work is so minimal because they knew that they only had a few people pages to like truly get the attention of people. And I think what they do with silhouettes and in that comic is stronger than many comics I've seen and super powerful. It's devastating in the few pages it is. I think it's like 10 pages. So highly recommend that comic, but that's something that I was trying to think about in this work when I was going to almost too into silhouettes. This is another old pages, another silhouette drawing. This one I also put in because it's a mixture of gouache. It's pretty funny. It's just gouache and it's has no words in it. I wanted to show by having this in, not again, another one that's not complete, but I always leave the words completely blank until I have to, until there is almost quite literally a gun to my head. Then I will fill in the words. If not, you know, you just got to be happy with the panels and you can imagine the words that could be in there, right? This is another case of that where you can see, you know, and this is kind of, you can see all the funny things that I do here because you can see the line that cuts across the kid, right? That's from my printing and scanning and printing and scanning. And then at that point, it's even like physically just a, abuse of the paper because it's printed into it now. And you can see the panels are blank. And you can see another issue that I was having, and that is that at a certain point, I have this odd ritual of printing and scanning so much that I'm almost worried about letting color get in the way of that. I don't want, after I've worked so hard to get this print scan, and then almost then the paper itself falling apart, I don't want the color to get in the way of that. So I try to do it the color as light as possible. And then, so I have a super light color, but then it's almost too washed, and then it's getting in the way of itself at a certain point. And so I'm going to read a comic to you all, and this will be a piece of a, how many pages is it? 77 page comic that I have for Austin English. we can negotiate on the amount of pages in there, Austin. But this is about halfway through in the comic. It's the main crux of the story is that there's a person who's willing to, murdered, rape, kill, I guess that's murder again, blacklist, blackmail, do anything to get a job working as a clerk at a pizza store. And they think that this beautiful 9 to 5 will bring them, the great American dream that has been snuffed out by almost every other goddamn American in this country. So the point is, not spoil anything, they get the job, right? And I did a 10-page snippet of what happens, maybe 12 pages after they get this pizza shop job. And I'm not going to read it verbatim, and it's just too close to the screen. One funny note too is that I haven't printed and scanned it as many times as I want to, so obviously the colors, may I say, are darker here than they will be later on. But let me start reading this. I just have to move this little zoom icon thing somewhere. Okay, great. Okay. And it goes, when I was bored at work, I would let my mind go to waste. I would start to have good dreams, but nothing as ambition as Martin Luther King's dreams, just normal dreams. I dreamed pretty easy and light, like maybe I would take a hit for JFK, so he doesn't have to get the bullet. And then the character, they're moving away their hair, and the bullet's about to hit their head, and they realize, oh my God, I didn't have it in my good, earnest heart to take that bullet for JFK, right? So it goes, now, since I knew that I would not die for my hero, I had to repent. So I take a noose and I tighten it. And as they're committing suicide, they say, why live in a world where even one person would not take their life instead of JFK's? It's just not a world you want to live in, right? So they committed suicide. It happened, and I'm sorry. And so the Secretary of Purgatory goes, hello, yes, this is the front desk of Purgatory. Oh no, okay, suicide? Oh no, she wouldn't take the bullet for Mr. JFK? Yeah, you're gonna have to send her down. It's gonna be the fourth floor. In short, the woman had sent me further down than I had known. So after that, I was sent to trial. In hell, my lawyer, he wasn't too convincing. The lawyer pulls a chair and he sits down. He hands over a piece of paper that says denied, and it says, you didn't make the cut to heaven. Do you want to try it again? And the character, they're thinking about it and they say no, but you can see there's a few dots. They're not certain, if they want to try it or not. So they go, I thought about saying yes to the rebirth, if not just to go back and kill everyone, and they can see that, the character is getting the gasoline, they're putting in the can, they're pouring out the gasoline, they're getting a match, because in ways, all of us have failed to save our hero, JFK. The house is burning now, and it's completely in flames, and the character is going back, and it says, I would go early to make sure all the hydrants are drained to maximize death. Thank God. We need those people dead for what they did. The dolls are burning, the bears in the house are burning, and I'm gonna make sure, and I'm gonna make sure and stay and make sure everything is burnt. I'm staying and watching, and after I'm done, I'm clapping at the good work. And you know what? That good work is worth a further place in hell, because at least the work is done. But even after the good work, it doesn't cleanse the hate, it can't stop the hatred. So taking the punishment, I catch the taxi down, and the taxi, as I'm about to get in, says no free rides. So the character is walking down, and while walking to the designated hell, I see a bar. So you know what? It's a bar. I'll just go off road to take a small peek, right? But the bar had a listing for a job opening as a gig as a dishwasher in the back. So yeah, you're in the back, so you don't get any sunlight from outside, and you can't see the roads, and it's a bar in hell. But you can imagine someone in the back screaming, hey, wash those dishes faster, boy. But it's just terrible because you're working at a bar in hell, yet they only give you 2 scraps a day. But hey, I got the job working in the back of the kitchen, stirring the food, and I thought, the night shift in hell is grueling, but it's better than serving time, and my coworkers never snitched. So there we have it. That is the end of that comic segment of that book. And Yeah, you can see I didn't get to printing and scanning yet, so hopefully it'll be a lot different than what everyone's seen today than the final version of it. But here, let me stop sharing my screen. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, nice to talk to you again. That was a very beautiful comic.
Oh, thank you. You too, about your comics.
Thank you.
So Sarah, I'm gonna ask you a hard truth, okay? Are you ready?
Yeah, yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. So between us and the people here on Zoom, I want to ask you something. I know you personally pretty well. You know, we didn't talk about this, but we've known each other for over 10 years. We went to high school together. You smoked your first cigarette with me, okay, Sarah? But there's something about all these memories that I say to you, right? Sometimes I worry about you knowing them because I know you have a terrible memory. It's something that you worry about and think about on a day-to-day basis, right? So it's interesting because you're someone making autobiographical work. So could you talk about that relationship, if you have one, with the bad memory and your work making?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I make comics and when I make any other form of art, there is a part of me, or like a big part of me, I guess, that wants to kind of encapsulate a memory that I have because of I don't have such a great memory. It's nice to have a physical image in front of me. Um, like I I think of memories as kind of like a romanticized version of reality, and it is interesting to think, to be able to show my good memories in my art.
Okay, I want to capture onto that little piece that you said there at the end when you're talking about a romanticized memory, because if you have a bad memory and you're making these comics that kind of overwork with like the over romanticization of them, when you're older and you're looking back on them and your memory is worse, is it then like you've built a kind of false reality that was your life? Like, do you not want to capture these bad memories too? And I only say that because it's interesting because in comics and a lot of autobiographical comics, people usually do a sort of inverse of what you're doing. I feel like I'm used to reading a lot more comics that deal with more bad memories and then going off of those.
I mean, I have no opposition of doing any comic about bad memories. I think bad memories are just as important as good memories. And I mean, I would like to make one because I think bad memories are, you know, there is um, a way, like it is very personal, I think is why I guess I haven't made so much art about my bad memories, is because of how personal it is. But I think the how personal they get is the appeal of comics that are more showing memories that are bad or not good memories. And um I mean, I guess I did make a comic of a bad memory of um my mother having neighbor disputes, and that was a terrible time and bad memories. And I think me making a comic about that was very therapeutic, and it kind of I added a comedic effect to the memory, and it kind of lightens that memory.
I see. Okay, so okay, that's interesting. You're using it like kind of to then cathartically subvert these bad memories into then even comedy.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever implemented any memories into your comics or art?
Definitely all the time. You know, it's funny because you and I we drive across America a lot. almost too much. So I find myself writing about that quite some because you see a lot of things when you're out there on the road. And so I've obviously done some pieces with that. And it's funny, you and I have both then also then created these pieces about our road trips. So it is true. And even in that one, I'm thinking of like this one I had done where, yeah, it was all about this terrible trip we had taken and how kind of everything that could have gone badly went badly. And then you almost counteracted that by doing a comic for Bernadette where you talked about how happy our road trip was. So
That was a
it's
different road trip.
true. That was a different road trip, but I find you funny in that way. But yeah, it's terrifying concept, all of it. Makes me think of the movie Click.
Oh, geez, don't bring that up.
Right? Well,
Can I ask you a question, Sam, just on this topic? I don't
oh
want to
yeah,
interrupt.
no, no, no. Go
I
ahead.
was curious about how a lot of both of your work, it's interesting hearing you guys talk about it in this way, in that there's so many maybe contemporary graphic novels that come out that you might see in bookstores or might have more of a reach in the world that might talk about memories and might talk about a bad memory or a bad experience or a bad issue that someone goes through. And so much of the graphic novel will be geared towards some kind of epiphany about the experience or some kind of judgment or some kind of negotiation of the experience. And I think what's interesting to me, I would say about both of your work is that it seems more just exploring the thought or exploring the feeling without guiding it into a specific corner and taming the memory and saying this is what it was about, just letting it kind of, and it's very hard to do in story form, but does that seem like, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, does that describe what you're doing a little bit, or is that does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. It reminds me of how, Sarah and I, we love a thing that we've tried to get implemented across the world called arc theory, and we really want to teach a class, if any college is willing, called Arc Theory 101. Because in arc theory you're always trying to you can watch a movie or you can read any book, and hypothetically, if there is an arc, you could at some point you would have to be able to figure it out because there would be the dominoes there beforehand. It wouldn't just be something that randomly happens right at the end. And arc theory in ways has ruined Sarah and I our lives because we can't watch TV or shows or read a book anymore without knowing, trying to figure out the arc or completely predicting it in the beginning. And I think that the point of what I'm saying is that Sarah and I try to then subvert this arc theory as much as we can. And I often think about how Hamlet is a good book for that because depending on which way you read it, it would be entirely the way that you perceive how the book went down, and you can't really have a say in how it went down. And I think also about how when you had a conversation with Phoebe, she talked about how memory is inherently fiction because you memorized it over and over again, and you've drawn it once, and then maybe you did a thumbnail and you did another thumbnail. So at a certain point, it just completely becomes a lie or a fib. And I
And
think
memory
that
degrades. The more you refer back to it, the more the memory degrades.
exactly, exactly. But I think those two things, like thinking of like trying to subvert an arc and then trying to remember that it's entirely just the fiction of your own train of thought of how it went down, kind of, at least for me, controls the way that I'm going to write a story. But Sarah, you want to speak to that?
I mean, I think there is, like a comfort in knowing that, people have similar experiences or similar emotions towards different memories. And yeah.
One thing that you said in your talk, Sarah, about how you don't think of yourself so much as a writer, and that maybe that's why, like in the beginning when you approach comics, you were like, I'm nervous about writing, so I'm going to do something autobiographical. One thing, a difference I noticed between the comics you guys make versus students I teach at SVA, who are not like maybe just 4 years behind you in terms of developing what they're doing with comics, is that they always, I teach them a storytelling class, and they always start planning out their stories with massive amounts of thumbnails, maybe script first, then thumbnails. And what I try to do in the class is I show them work by an artist named Anke Fuchtenberger, and she talks about how she just starts doing a drawing and then follows the consequence of the drawing. You know,
Mhm.
a finished drawing, a drawing that will be just what she's focused on, and that will later be published, and then she'll modify the next drawing in relation to that. She doesn't do any thumbnails or anything like that. And I wonder, it seems to me more your approach with writing is you're really writing with as you create the story. It's not that you're doing it in an improvisational way, but the writing of it is the actual process of making the comic. That's what it seems to me. Is that true, or am I far off base, or does that resonate at all?
I think, um, well, I guess, I mean, with the one that I read in that was in that's going to be in Jaywalk was I wrote that and then I made a comic. The writing was never really intended to be a comic. And then the ones that I'm doing now that I'm storyboarding are, I guess, more I planned it out. Like I wrote it beginning, middle, end. And then I um thought of how I wanted to start the page and end the page.
What about you, Sam?
Um, I have a totally terrible relationship to it. I don't really I don't think of any text until I fully have the image down. So I always leave the text blank like how it was in my slides until the very end. And then my imagery often gets repeated because I start in the same process every time I make a new page. So that kind of leads to then after me making like 10 or so pages, I'll try to then figure out a story or think of a concept and add it from there. It's it's funny because then obviously sometimes I end up going back and cutting things out and then removing one drawing that may like I'll be like okay well I do have to contextualize it somehow, so like for the severed hand one I did the rest of the page and then I added in that severed hand at the end to contextualize the idea of working in the back kitchen. But for the most part I do it pretty randomly. It's weird because like when I think about the way that I write books or do anything else, it's not like at all the way that I would go about creating a comic.
I'm gonna did you want to ask Sarah more questions? And Sarah, did you want to ask Sam more questions before we go into some of my questions and audience comments and stuff?
Sure. I think I wanted to ask Sarah about I wanted what was interesting to me, Sarah, about your work is that you seem to have a style that is very much the style that is in your paintings. And then there's like a kind of different style, even the one that you did in the poetry comic to the one that you did in for your neighbor piece, which I know wasn't in this one, and your mattress one. Do you want to talk about then like kind of your different cohesive styles that change throughout your medias?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I explore different um, mediums, my style, I like to see how my style looks in different mediums, and that like sometimes I've even like drawn a picture and then painted the picture and then like weaved the picture, like the same image to see like I'm interested in how that will look. And I mean, I think, the obvious uh my most of my paintings are very vibrant colors. My comics are more, in black and white. I just think there's like a stylistic difference between them because of like the amount of detail or maybe the skill I have in each different medium.
Mm.
Um, I mean, you know, we're talking about how you do your print scan, you know, um, process, and like I wondered how you came to the conclusion of such a spontaneous approach to assembling all of your comics.
I do not know how I ended up here, and if there was a way to get out of it, I would, because it's terribly inconvenient. You just want to draw a page and then all of a sudden you got to print, scan it, and it's just, a burden. I don't know. It's odd because it wasn't always the case for sure. It's a newer phenomenon within the past, I would say 4 years or so. But yeah, it's odd because again, it doesn't, I don't have that issue for it's only seems to be about making a comic. Maybe it's about the way that the panels are. It's always a different combination you could create with that, if that makes sense. So you
Hmm.
just like almost what you're saying, wanting to see the best iteration of it that you can. Um, and it's, it's just like I guess in classic analog kind of Photoshop in ways, right?
Yeah, um, that is very interesting in how you, like, I feel like that process, do you think that because you do that, is that why you do your um the words second, or did you do did you do all that because you were planning on doing the words after your images?
I see. I think that when it comes to the comics, it feels that I could hypothetically, if I'm showing some bigger scene or some bigger idea, I could put any drawing to any words. Obviously, that's not true, and I should work on getting a more kind of cohesive drawing to word because I remember I was doing a comic talk last year and I thought it went really well. I thought I made complete sense and people were laughing at the jokes I was doing when I was reading it. And after I went over to my friend, one of my best friends who also makes comics, and I said, "Hey, like, did you like my talk? Did you think it was good?" And he turned to me and he said, "It seemed like you were up there just having a schizophrenic episode. I have no clue what the hell you were talking about." And broke my mind because to me that was the most, like I tried the most to put a drawing to an image, a joke to the joke, I really tried to make it as clear as possible. And then this guy's telling me, my best friend, that I'm having a schizophrenic episode. So that showed me that, I just got to let go of it and just got to draw and put whatever words it's going to look or seem however it's going to seem to whoever it is, right?
But don't you think comics on a whole, like maybe one of the things that might separate people who have really interesting approaches from approaching comics is that it seems like other mediums, painting, cinema, whatever, literature, are welcoming of some kind of complex approach and maybe sitting with the work and trying to make sense of it, even if it is pretty to the point, but has some ambiguity to it. Where you guys, from your perspective, you went to Cooper Union. I think Sarah went to Pratt. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, do you think there's something that maybe before you started making comics, looking at the culture of comics, did it seem that work that you're observing maybe bubbling up as having a following or something kind of prizes clarity more than other mediums that you might have been working with while in art school? Or I mean, because your work to me fulfills the potential of comics not even battling against this requirement for clarity, but just dispensing with it, not towards abstraction, not towards non-clarity, but to something to some kind of emotional complexity, which is what I always am waiting for more of from this medium because I think it's very capable of it. But was there something maybe before making comics where you saw comics as being sort of closed off to that sort of emotional complexity and prizing clarity?
That's interesting. Yeah, I always found that people who liked comics but didn't like comics enough, I would hand them a comic that I made or a comic that I liked, and they would just look at the drawings and then they would hand it back to me. And I would be like, "Did you like it? Did you like the story? Like, I love this book. I love this one." And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I didn't read it though." And I thought to myself, it's so it would irk me so much because that would happen all the time when I'm giving my friends comics that I liked. And it made me realize that no matter what, even if someone is entirely as clear as they want to be, someone could just not read the words, and then it just becomes that kind of half vision of what a comic is. And I wonder how much that does happen on a day-to-day basis. And that to me then was kind of a nice clue in that I could just kind of get away on getting someone in with the drawings and then later maybe getting them to read the words if they can read the words. It's funny, I know I do the cursive that is often also cut off a lot too. I thought it's because I went to this odd school where you had to do cursive, you weren't allowed to do anything else for pre-K through eighth grade. So I thought that that was just, everyone could understand even like a scribbly cursive, but I found out even recently too that it's completely illegible to most people. So with those two things, I don't know. Yeah, I have to think about it more. I definitely feel like I want to maybe get clear, or maybe the non-clarity is doing what it needs to do. But
So
Sarah,
I should, well, just before Sarah talks, I should emphasize I don't see it as I mean, the reaction you were describing, I was there at that comics reading, and I found it very, I know the one you're describing. I found it, to me, it's like whether it's not, it's you. I followed it. I followed it, yeah, as in terms of the emotions that were expressed and the thought that was expressed, and I think for the most part, it was very like, I mean, to talk about it as being clear and not clear, I think misses the point. I think it's more that people expect comics to be overly clear. I think that's the problem that I encounter a lot. And I think,
that's
yeah, I think for you, what you expressed is like very obviously straightforward and from the heart, but not in that strange language that comics is so used to, expressing itself in.
yeah.
What were you going to say, Sarah?
I mean, uh, yeah, like even how I was describing my step by step, like how I wanted to continue progressing my um how I was making comics, that even is like, I wanted to get to the point of where I could make a storyboard, which is kind of like a clarity, in those comics. And it's interesting because it's not like I feel like you need to get, you don't need to storyboard a comic, and you don't need to do an autobiographical comic, and you can do any kind of comic that you want to do. Um, but because of a lot of the comics that I was reading, that is what my mind was going towards as to what like the next progression is to making comics more and more.
You said something really interesting about, and I think this is, I think true for a lot of people who come to comics that you are interested in all different kinds of art forms, and comics allow for a place to explore so
Mhm.
much. And I think there's like even like a very traditional artist like Will Elder, it's like I look at his work and I see him like trying to use as much like as symbols of letters and every little corner of the drawing, just the totality of the medium. And then so many people seem to uh even if someone like Will Elder is this beloved figure in traditional comics, I think so many people look to other mediums like traditional Hollywood movies and base their comics around the lessons from that and um, don't explore the art form of comics as much. Who are maybe some people that you guys read or maybe you specifically, Sarah, that do what you're talking about, that explore all different kinds of art forms within the medium of comics?
That explore all different kinds of art forms.
Well, yeah, like what you're talking about with your work, like artists that you see maybe engaged in a similar kind of interest in the form and
I mean, like, I really like the artist Red Grooms because of how much he makes paintings and like paper mache and paper cutouts and lots of sculptures and stuff. And I think that was one of the first artists that I saw that I realized, like you can tell that he made all of these things, but they're all either 3D or 2D or, in so many different mediums. And it just excited me to be able to think that I could see my art in different forms and I guess kind of try to explore what maybe the best outcome this image could be in. Um, yeah, that was, I guess, the artist that I saw the most like multimedia in. Yeah.
Was there someone like that for you, Sam?
Um, I am not sure. When I think of one piece that truly moved me in a way almost closer towards comics, which is funny because it's a painting. I think of a painting by what is his name? Grant Wood. He's a classic painter, and he did a painting called Crash on Ridge Road, I believe it's called. And it's funny because it's called that, right? But the piece is just a big truck coming down a hill and a smaller white car driving towards that truck, right? And they're on the same road and they're coming around a bend and you're looking at the painting, it's a small painting, it's like only this big, and you're horrified in a way to turn away because it feels like when you're turning away, you're letting the people in the painting die because it's called Crash on Ridge Road, but the crash isn't happening. It's almost happening like the second that you look away. And that kind of feeling, that horror, that made me want to keep on staring at that painting forever, um, made me think about a lot of like again, like when you flip a comic page, how if a character dies, or if you say a character dies, their death only becomes real as soon as you flip the page or as soon as you accept that narrative. So yeah, I guess that would be one that I think of closely.
I'm going to read this comment from Wayne Coe, and I encourage other people to ask questions. I'll just have you guys maybe comment on this comment. Wayne says, so much of memory is disremembered, fantasy of a good story, that at least in my storyteller's case is perfected, simplified, unified, thematically distilled. Who, except maybe Warhol, would just copy what they do without much thought or input? Memories are those stories that we remember because of their special meaning. What's nonfiction? It's all art, writing and drawing, painting, writing and drawing and painting. Media is inherently unreliable, and artists who work exclusively from dreams.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of the charm of why I liked making art based off of memories is because it is like I said, like a romanticized version of reality. It's never really the exact thing that happened, and I think that that is put into so much of my work, even if it's not just like a specific image of my memory, it's like different parts, like the trees that were in this part of my life and like the tablecloth that was in this part of my life. Like it's all very sporadic and splotchy.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting even having you read that comic about the Long Island gas cloud because I almost want to interject like because we had this gas leak that happened in our house and we had called National Grid and instead of helping us, this man came and he just told us it was the Long Island gas cloud, right? And he dismissed our definite gas leak and just walked out and said, like, you're just smelling the Long Island gas cloud, right? And that is the memory of how it happened. And reading your comic and having you read it, it's so funny the way that my head starts to almost fill in the blanks of that, or then I start to misremember what you're, reading to me because I'm like, oh wait, yeah, there was more people, or this happened, or yeah, we did move to Long Island when none of those things happened. The way that it starts to then get interwoven with reality is it's funny. It is terrifying at the same time, but it's true. It's just it could be changed at a moment, the way that it's remembered in your head.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's what's most interesting about making art about memories, that it's no matter, like how you said, like I changed it. Obviously, that's not at all what happened to us, but it's like uh just as true or just as remembered as reality because of how distant it is and how warped it gets by people telling me different things.
I like how yours almost makes more sense in ways than what actually happened.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
Can I ask you guys to, I'm going to share my screen for just 1 second and show a collaborative drawing that you guys did together, just so people can see. Um, So this is something that you guys both worked on. And I kind of wanted, the reason that I wanted to have you guys on together, um, is for you guys to talk about a little bit, about your own work, about the work you do individually, but about maybe how you've influenced each other's work and ways you've worked together.
Well, I mean, honestly, we haven't worked together much. Like, I think that was one of the few times that we've actually physically made a drawing together. But I mean, I think us being such close proximity to each other, like through, since like high school till now, is like we have definitely influenced each other and impacted each other. I mean, like in high school, Sam is the person who really taught me how to paint. And she's the one who like showed me like, this is how you do shadows and lighting. And, like I think our art is very different. And I think the way we make art is very different now. But I think it started very close together. And we both learned to develop our own styles.
It's interesting too. I love every time someone new comes over to our house. We have a lot of our work up, and Sarah and I, we just, we'll make a bowl of popcorn and then we'll drag someone across our house and we'll say, "Who drew it?" And that is entirely the game, and the person's terrified, they're sweating, they don't want to answer wrong or offend one of us. And obviously, we would not be offended at all, but most of the time they can't get that right at all. So, it definitely is like we have a language that is when we go down to like our basics, even looking at our comics right now, it's so funny. I asked myself a question I almost wanted to write was why do we both draw grass so much?
That's
And
funny.
I thought about that and I didn't have an answer. It's not like we have this special bond that happened where it's like, oh, remember when we ran in the fields together? No, there's no, and we don't even.
That about our birds too.
Our birds are grass. There's definitely that. We love cars too.
Oh yeah, true.
And then if you draw, yeah, that would be the baseline of any of our paintings, probably. You could find those things, those elements, that kind of Where's Waldo of what we're creating. I don't really know what it is, but there definitely is like a lot of
Yeah.
big moments we've had where we've had to sit together and draw work side by side. I say
Yeah.
this almost under very secret oath, but we did like even when I'm thinking of our college applications when we were originally applying to colleges, remember we helped each other almost interchangeably paint each other's paintings or give each other ideas or just we've gone to a point where also we'll just say like that openly, we'll just tell each other, like that looks terrible. Even
Mhm.
before this talk, Sarah was like, why the fuck does the hand look like that? It's not how it ever looked. We're getting into the fight of the semantics of how someone could hold a phone. And she was right. Yes, the phone would not be held like that, but it could be held like that. So I think that openness we have to talk to each other about what we're even doing wrong in our work is what then also makes our work stronger together.
I have two more questions kind of on that point that I wanted to ask you guys, and then hopefully some other people will ask some questions as I ask these. Before the talk started, I was asking Sarah about one of her comics that she just put out and trying to get a copy. And Sarah was talking about how it was printed very beautifully, but in a very small print run, and there is, I think, a very vibrant community that you guys are a part of in New York right now. And a lot of the publications that are made in very these beautifully made print runs that are very small, and they get out there among the community. And you guys do work that gets out there beyond. But it does, what I've observed is it does seem like a big motivating factor in making your work at the highest, really being involved in making comics, kind of like comics at their highest level, in terms of engagement and in terms of your interest in them. I kind of assume that some of the motivating factor is the work that others are making and being inspired by what peers are doing and wanting to equal it or contribute to what's happening that others are doing. And I wonder how true that is. If part of the community that you guys are a part of, there's a lot of cartoonists around you, and you're all making work in a non-traditional way, but in this kind of very, very vibrant and very assured way, which I think is very unique. You don't see that often. And I wonder how much of a motivating factor the community of artists you're around is, just in terms of the art that's being made, or if it's really maybe that's totally off. Maybe it's just completely internal, the ambition to make the work as well as you're making it.
I mean, I think that having friends who do comics is very inspiring, and I think, yeah, I agree. Like when I see um my friends making a book or making an anthology or something, it's very inspiring and it shows me like, I would like to make a book like that one day, and it's nice to be able to see that people so close to me are able to do that. Um, and yeah, Sam.
I think it's almost 100% true, your analysis of it, Austin. Um there'll be days when because I stayed up all night drawing a comic, Sarah comes in and she'll be like, "Well, what the hell? Because you did that, now I have to do that." And then she stays up all night drawing comic, and then I see the one that she does, and I'm like, "Well, what the hell? Now I have to, And we get stuck in an infinite cycle, and then that's worsened by our friends coming over, drawing in front of us, or if you're the last one the last one getting a page in, and then you see the other work, and then you just, have to say like, yeah, give me a second, let me just scan this one thing again, and secretly you're just redrawing it. Or we've spent a lot of time. We used to be in like the anthology series that Floyd had been editing, just because he had retired both of them, so we're not participating in them right now. But I remember that Sarah would even often lie, and we would both lie, not to just throw you under the bus and throwing us both under. But we would be like, "Oh yeah, we have the piece done. Let me just go and get it for you tomorrow," and then she's really basing it off of what others had done and what others haven't done. So I think it's been nice because it's definitely forced us to do way more than what we would have done. And that has made us do all these different angles to it that never would have been ones that we wanted to do, even.
You both come out of, I think, I assume the painting programs at Cooper and Pratt. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Do you feel that that's true? You come out of the painting program at Cooper, right, Sam?
Yeah.
Do you feel do you feel the same sense of this kind of, you know, this kind of movement or community or however you want to describe it? Maybe those aren't the right terms, but do you feel something close to that within the painting world in the city or your ambition for making paintings?
Ooh, sure.
No. No. I don't. I mean, I guess if I'm thinking back to to school, I don't really talk to anyone who was in my painting program, and I don't know, it feels like more of a community in comics, like there's like comics releases and there's like uh it just seems like very interesting when somebody comes out with a new book when, you don't really make a big deal about when someone makes a new painting. Um,
Well, maybe shows.
yeah, I guess, but it seems like, yeah, I guess I'm not as in tune with the painting scene as I am with the comic scene.
Yeah, it would be funny. I remember going to Cooper and I would do a lot of comic paintings and I would get stuck in these semantical fights with my peers about if it was a comic or if it's painting or how many separations in a painting can one image have until it is a comic. Um and I thought it was the funniest discourse on it, but I don't know. There definitely is a what seems like a different community towards painting than there is towards comics.
It's interesting to me just because living in the city for the last couple decades, it's like people that go to art school in New York and end up making comics. It's usually I just haven't seen Cooper activated until very recently. Like it's very rare that I see people coming out of Cooper making comics, and now there's enough that I mean there's many people doing that, and that seems like a very new thing, and I mean to me it's like incredibly positive.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I know that the old president of the school, he just had retired maybe 2 years ago, but he was obsessed with comics. And he had worked on like editing the newer edition of Watchmen, and he was, he would do the like when he would do open houses, he would do entire speeches only humorously about comics to the kids, and obviously these kids who didn't care at all about them. So there definitely was like the school had a more like openness to comics that it definitely didn't have before. And it's interesting. I wonder how much it actually is accepted within the school's teaching or what it wants people to do. But yeah, I unfortunately didn't go to class as much as I should have when I went there. So maybe I mean, I could be wrong on this, but it didn't seem like comics were very welcomed or talked about in school in classroom setting.
Let me maybe get closer to the end by asking you guys both about in that flyer that I showed that you guys collaborated on, it was, it was a flyer for a comics reading in New York, but you're both from San Francisco, and in that flyer you put the San Francisco area code in it somewhere. It like said it had like 415 like hidden in it. And so San Francisco is obviously, and I'm from San Francisco. San Francisco is obviously very important to you guys, or maybe, I don't know, that was a couple years ago. Maybe it's not important anymore. Um, but San Francisco is also such a historical comic city, and I think the the peers that you guys come out of, it's very inspiring to me that there's these people coming from San Francisco really pushing the medium forward in my mind. That's very gratifying. So what is does San Francisco have like some are comics in the ether in San Francisco, or like did you get a sense of them growing up that retained with you, or just your thoughts on San Francisco in general, maybe as a place that relates to your art, or your appreciation of it?
Sam, you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah, sure, I'll go first. I unfortunately, I'm named Sam. I often say I'm Sam Francisco, but other than that too, I'm named Sam and I'm born on 415 day, which is tax day, so I'm named after Uncle Sam. I say that all the time and my mother doesn't like it at all, but it is true. I feel very connected to the city. I didn't question the kind of mentality that is around comics that I was so confused by when I first moved to New York. I thought that everyone was kind of on the same page, knowing the lore of underground comics or the love for it too. Because you go down to, if you just want to take the bus home, going from school to home, you have to go through the hate, and then there's all the hippies selling you terrible reprints of Keep on Trucking. So it's just not something that you're truly questioning. It's just ever encompassing. Um, that being said, though, I wonder how much it truly did affect the comic making. I'm sure it entirely did because again, my dad was also like this 60s kind of hippie guy and he had so many underground comics. So I think it is something that I can't let go of even if I try to.
I mean, I don't I don't know. I didn't really read or start making comics until I was an adult. Like I was 19 or 20. And um I mean, I didn't really think about it, I guess, when I was living there. But I mean, I think about San Francisco very fondly, you know. I mean, me and Sam kind of grew up in the same neighborhood, like maybe 20 or so blocks away from each other. And, you know, I don't know, I think about the fog very fondly. And even me and Sam going there recently was very nice and nostalgic. Um,
But Sarah, I would even say it's so funny. I think it's like it's so part of us that we don't even question it because when I think of your high school bedroom, I think of like all the zippies that you had everywhere and your zippy shirt too. You know, like it was something
yeah,
that again was there and you just didn't even notice it or everyone's classic with their Big Brother album, but you had it right there on your wall too. So I think it's maybe you don't question it, right?
like
It's in the
subconsciously.
fabric there. It's
Yeah. You just, if you grow up in San Francisco, you have a zippy shirt and
Well, also,
and
I think about Kirby. I think about how, as us being teenage girls in high school, everyone we knew was always loving Diary of a Teenage Girl, and we didn't even seem to question it either. It just seems to be part of. You don't think of it as niche. You think of it as pop culture almost fully, like that. Everyone's on the same page of where it's going and what it is.
yeah, I think that's true. Well, let me ask you guys. Sam, you said that that page you showed was for an upcoming anthology that's coming out on Sunday. I didn't. This is the first I've heard of that. So maybe you guys can tell me like things you're working on, or what you have coming out, or what projects you guys are working on, and yeah, and just what you're engaged in.
Yeah, that first page is from a comic that's it's the back cover of a comic that is Pothole. Sarah did the inside and then James did the cover, and I think James and Mick are having a release somewhere to be decided on Sunday. Um, and I have that, and then another big work that I have coming out is obviously the comic I made for you that I uh can have ready at your will.
Oh, it's already ready? I didn't know that. I
I
didn't.
have I'm ready. I haven't put in again. It's the relationship that I have towards. I want to get them exactly right. And then
Oh, yeah.
after it's
I didn't
complete.
know it was 77 pages. That's very exciting.
I thought I had to go larger than, if I made you wait so long, I can't give you some measly number.
So
And
that comic will come out. So a full solo comic by you, which we saw some pages of just now, will come out later this year.
okay, that's great.
I mean, no, I mean I'm asking you.
Yeah,
I
that's
can't do anything with it until I have until I have the pages. But
I'll give you the key to the master document. And I don't know. It's funny. I've a lot of paintings, but I don't know what to do with that work. So we'll see. Maybe there'll be something that Sarah and I will do.
Uh, yeah, I mean, maybe we'll start our first collab or our second collab. Um, but yeah. I'm just
Have
making.
your neighbor comic, right, Kirby, coming?
Yeah, I finished a comic that I read for um at a Grimm brewery, and I finished that. Is about it's 20 pages, but so that will come out soon, and I am just in the process of just making art that I enjoy making.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end things. I think that's a great thing to hear. And I will when I post this to YouTube, I'll have links so you guys can find some of the work that you guys have done. And this was lovely. This was so nice to talk with you guys about this stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Austin.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time. It was great. And, you know, it's a good transition because next week, speaking of San Francisco and underground comics, the guest of the symposium will be, and it'll be live and in person as well as streaming online. It'll be live and in person at 63 Fifth Avenue at the New School. It will be Dan Nadel speaking about his new biography of Robert Crumb. So that will be the next and I think final. Oh, there was one rescheduled, but one of the final dates of this symposium calendar. So I'm sure everyone will want to check that out as well. Thank you so much, you guys. This was wonderful. Oh, wait, someone has one question here. Wayne wants to know, so we'll leave with this question. Can I ask a couple questions? Inspirations. I'm a West Coast artist, born 415.
Oh.
Raw on New York visits I still own. Wayne, did you have a question beyond that? You want to ask about inspirations?
Yes.
All right, take it away.
Um, Hello. thanks
Oh,
for thanks for talking with us. It was wonderful. So yeah, I mean you're kind of young, but when I was closer to your age, I visited New York several times, thinking of moving there, and I picked up those huge one shots by Gary Panter and Art Spiegelman and just these amazing artists, and it was clearly utterly different because of scale, because it was totally for adults. I would even say it was for adult aesthetes. So, you know, I still have them. And it's not that I imitate them, but I didn't work on comics till 2 years ago. They were always in my mind. Sue Coe,
yeah.
um, you know, who's just phenomenal. She lives in Catskill. I live in Chatham, which is I don't know, 20 miles, 30 miles from her. And my last name's Coe, but I've never met her. And so, yeah, do you guys, I know you were saying underground comics, Zippy, were always around. Are those things, anyway, give me some of your, like, oh, you should go look at this, Wayne. What works have you gone, this is a great, crazy idea. I love this.
Sarah, you want to go first on that?
Well, recently I just discovered in my mom's bookshelf this copy of Raw magazine and I was immediately drawn to the Munoz and Sampaio uh collaboration comic in there, and it was just, I mean, I really love like noir and detective books and stuff, and then the art is just so amazing. I just got a copy of Sinner #1. That one is really, really awesome. And I really was inspired a lot by Charles Burns's Black Hole was really beautiful, and I loved how cinematic it was.
Sam?
I would highly recommend. I work at a bookstore called Human Relations, and if you don't have a copy of it, it's pretty rare, you know, and I don't want to, you know, I'm sorry, Austin, and anyone who's like a collector, and I'm exposing anything here. But there's a beautiful comic called Prairie State Blues, and there's a signed copy of it at HR, and I have it one destroyed copy of it on the floor. You know, it looks like this kind of overly like Americana comic about these like. Nice try. You look at these pages here, but it's just again, it's that same silhouetting work that just is truly amazing. It's a super weird comic. Another San Francisco classic is Tommy's Joint. You know, we always ate at Tommy's Joint. We always loved the place, and we always loved the mural outside of it. Never questioned it, but it's by Justin Green, and we love Justin Green's work obviously too, as much as we love Tommy's Joint's food. Um,
I had the experience with that place where as a kid I would see it and I was just like, wow, that must be the most amazing place in the U. Like I couldn't wait to eat there. And then when you eat there, it's just, you know, it's like it's like a decent diner.
oh
But
God, that was crazy. I thought it was the best food I ever had.
oh, okay. Well,
Sarah and
the
I,
outside of it is just like my expectations were so high because it just feels like out of a dream or something.
it's true. It does look like also it has like that speakeasy, like you just gotta, as a kid, you don't even know what could be in there behind the
Yeah,
door.
yeah. It's just a total image, you know?
That's true. No, that is so funny. I hadn't gone until like 16 or something, and I think it broke my mind in that way of like just classic San Francisco lore. But yeah, like Sarah held up, we love Pinky Brown. And another person whose comics we love is Michael Hurley. Obviously, he just passed away. Rest in peace. But he just had some of the most beautiful again, it reminds me of the simple line work that he's able to do so much with. And his comics are pretty hard to get a hold of. And
Mm.
I know now they're probably going to be a lot harder to get a hold of. But there are some, like, if you look up Michael Hurley comics, there's some pages of it online, but no one has ever uploaded a master document of them, which someone should.
One other question. I have this crazy West Coast idea of the difference between West Coast artists and East Coast artists. I find West Coast artists, well, on East Coast, everything's about real estate. So it's like, you know, your art looks like this, and it can't look too much like this, but we're going to dig real deep and explore that area between Pollock and Krasner. You know, and there's this obsession with real estate. On the West Coast, to me, it's all about boundarylessness. And that is, there's like new drugs, new sex, new music, new comics. There's always this kind of explorer about extending boundaries. You know, why can't we do this? Or, you know, inspiration. So that's my crazy view as a West Coast artist when I got here in terms of, and I don't know, do you feel there's any legitimacy to that? Or is that just, which is okay. That's just my Whittier, California, Southern California idea.
Can I ask you to just to see if I understand? You mean like on the East Coast, people are like exploring there's like the major influences, like these artists that are known to all, and there's an exploration of the like an artist can base their whole career on the intricate relationship or the intricate connection between these two different artists, and that can be like studying a very small area and seeing where you can go from that. Whereas on the West Coast, you're suggesting maybe more building on one major artist and going in any direction instead of
not even building on an artist, building on yourself.
Okay.
Building on your perspective from your window, building on your pedigree, building on your you know, whatever strange instinct you have. You know, I think of you know, Warhol didn't show his soup cans in New York. He showed them at the Ferris Gallery in California. I think it's Kim Jones who did the Mudman. He was one of the early performance artists. You know, he came out, he was a vet, and he started doing this thing of wearing a muddy, glued together exoskeleton over himself and walking to the beach from downtown LA. There are so many cases where from John Baldessari, who set up the CalArts um, program and transformed fine arts. All these artists who maybe couldn't find work in LA went to New York and became all the blue chip artists of the 80s. Because John Baldessari turned out, whether you like his painting or not, to be an absolutely brilliant chairman of the non-painting department. And his idea was, you can't teach art. And so he said, the best I can do is take you guys, if you were my students, to artist studios and see the art and talk to the artists and experience their process. And that idea took what, and then I have to talk about what my dad said way back in the day, was, well, colleges are based, the value of a college, whether it's a good college or not, is based on how far behind the times it is. So if you go to a great college, it's about 10 years behind the industry and what people are doing. If you go to a state college, it's 25 or 50 years behind. And so what Baldessari did was he just pushed it right up against what was actually happening. And he said he didn't have the budget to take his kids to Europe all the time. But what he would do would be he would take, and I highly recommend the book, Jack Goldstein and the CalArts Mafia, by Richard Hertz, who was a professor of mine at Art Center. And all these people doing, they're doing art, but where they started is so different than like, Richard Prince, for instance, who's working as an art director and is photographing, advertisements, sans copy. All these people are terrific artists, but the whole pictures generation thing to me, and this again is like, a retread.
What can Sarah and Sam, as bi-coastal, as people from San Francisco and making work in New York, what do you want to know from them? Just to center us.
Yeah, sure. Well, the inspiration thing, and then I mean, Sam said it. She said you're surrounded by an ethos.
Yeah.
And you can take it for granted.
Yeah.
Which I certainly did when I was growing up. My ethos was probably more film. And what's weird is, like, I look at my early drawings and they're populated with this horrible stuff, crashing cars and people being shot. and I look back and said, I'm very nonviolent, so I find it hard to look at. But I was just, it was just a reflection of the kind of scary stuff you're shown as a child. And so anyway, I think that ethos is still there. It's going to disappear, I think. But I think it's foundational to a lot of important arts that's come from the West Coast, even though they may not have the collector base and may not have the institutional base. They have a lot more now than they had when I was young. But does that sound? I mean, do you have a different impression?
No, it reminds me of Sarah and I went to a public arts high school that was opened up originally funded by Ruth Asawa, who is an artist who went to the Black Mountain College. And it's funny, just even like that whole scene, like you think of California and you think of those geometric Bucky domes, the Buckminster Fullertons.
Yeah.
It's interesting how they're even now banned in California. But I think that California is an unending spring of that kind of culture. Sarah and I, we've been in New York for quite some time now, but we just went back and we love our friends there. They have a total different approach to work making. But they're still making like this insane work that almost we don't understand at all. We went to their show, our friends, we love them, and they have a band you can feed on YouTube. It's called Quiet Band, and it's almost horrific what they do. It's nightmarish, and I don't understand it at all. I will be completely honest, but they go onto a stage and they do these things that get them kicked out of everywhere they go. Performance wise, but it's very unique, and so I think it's a place that people are very welcoming about what they're just happy to have any of your friends create any work, no matter what that work is. And so I think it's a lot of defying the rules, a lot of groundbreaking stuff then comes out of the scenes because there is this natural want and love of just the work making as a whole. But Sarah, did you have that same impression when we went back there?
Um, I mean, I would guess I was thinking of more of how when you were talking about um the the West Coast and East Coast comics. I mean, and how they're different is I think like how Austin said was that the people here are where all of our friends are very open to exploring and not having any boundaries here, and that's been most of my experience in comics. Um, and that's been on the East Coast.
Yeah, I mean I'm happy that you guys are making work in New York because I think no matter what people say about New York not being what it was, there's still so many people here. And no matter what you're doing and whatever art form you're pursuing, I always feel that you're never going to be limited to a certain style that's in vogue, a certain thing that's happening in the city. Um, it's just it's always things are always evolving here because there's it just by virtue of there being so many people here and so many artists working in all these different ways and whatever you're trying to work out, you can find people that are trying to work that specific thing out, but they're a little farther along than you, rather than in smaller communities, I would say worldwide, there's often a limit of you're in a certain city, even if it's a world, capital in Europe or something. There's something that there's one person at the center of the scene and they set the style and standard. And there's people who think outside of that, but they end up getting limited by that. That's at least what I explore. And New York still feels outside of that. So I'm very grateful that you guys are here. I'm going to read a question from cartoonist Nate Garcia.
Mhm.
And he says, Austin, I have a question. You can read it. He wants to know if Sam and Sarah have anything to say about the scarcity of the comics and if they care about accessibility, the accessibility of your work. I think he's talking about.
Um, I mean, I guess the accessibility of my comics. I mean, I just me Mick just printed one of them, and I will be having the comic about neighbors out soon. I don't know. I mean, for a while I've just done comics for my own enjoyment and have been happy not having to put them. I mean, I guess they've been put in uh my friends' anthologies and stuff, but yeah, it's just been mainly for enjoyment.
And I feel like if I could just interject before Sam talks, I think there are some comics that you guys are making that might be hard for people outside of New York to access because of the print run. But I feel it's inevitable that there'll be reprints of these work that other people will be able to see. It's only that'll happen eventually. And what I think is great about the work that you guys are making is that there's so often people in an arts community that are so ambitious about getting their work out there as much as possible at the expense of the work itself. And I think I see you guys being focused on the work, like as you say, the pleasure of making the work and that being the primary focus to exclusion of other things. And the rest will settle itself, That's what I see. What do you think, Sam?
Um, I am honestly, selfishly kind of happy about they're not, that they can't be gotten because, a lot of them are ones that I do, and especially in the beginning or the earlier works, they're ones that I do without really questioning the like imagery or what it's doing or the storyline in them. So a lot of them are just these funny, terrible stories that I didn't think were truly going to go anywhere. So I'm happy to see their demise. in ways, but some of them it is funny. I will find out that something exists and I didn't even know that it existed because I've never even seen a copy of it. So there is definitely somewhere in the middle that needs to be met with that. I would hope one day to maybe have some sort of anthology made of some sort of collection, maybe of the ones that I think should survive time in those ways. But it's not something I'm too worried about.
Yes, and your solo comic from Domino will be available to worldwide. And Sarah has a story in an upcoming anthology called Jaywalk 5, which will be available to all as well. So we have those works to look forward to. And the other work finding its way, so, inevitably very soon. Okay, someone has okay, Wayne has another question, but maybe let me just see what he's saying here. Uh
Not a question.
Oh, okay. He has another comment. Um, yeah, he's just kind of asking about the difference between comics and um let's Suko. Are you guys Suko fans? Maybe we could end on that. I could see Suko being an influence on what you guys do.
Oh, sorry, it cut out.
Oh, I was just
Yeah.
Wayne brings up Suko, and I'm wondering if I think you I heard one of you agreeing when Suko was brought up before. I could see Suko seems to have some similarities between what you guys do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sarah and I had just been talking about just the line work or the weight work in Suko's pieces, but I'm trying to think of a direct. Again, I think it's any of the work, obviously, I feel like has influenced us at ways that we probably could not receive in like a, it's probably just to our bone.
Yeah. Well, I this was wonderful, you guys, and thank you so much for taking time to do this, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your new work and seeing what you do next. So thanks to you
Thank
both. And thanks for being part of this symposium.
Thank
thank
you
you.
for having us. This was
Thank
Yeah.
really
you.
exciting.
Bye, you guys. See you soon.
Bye. Thank you.